Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How you doing this morning, Jerrod?
I think I'm good, man. I think I'm good. I had to pause for a second there. We're a little out of our rhythm. We're recording on a day we don't normally record, so it feels different but good nonetheless, and I'm excited for this week's episode. I think it's going to be good for people. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling grateful and I'm feeling blessed. I think a reason that we came to this episode was just lots of adversity, lots of challenges, lots of change. I've had two people very close to me pass away in the last 10 days. Got a move coming up, huge business changes. So there's been some tears in the last few weeks. So I'm really looking forward to episode 105. Real Men Do Cry.
Yeah, it'll be good to get this one out and share with our community, especially the men in the world that are, sometimes searching for more and looking for answers to certain things. I think this is quite honestly, it's a problem that we have in our society that I'm excited to explore more and talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Everything good with you? I know you got a lot of changes coming up as well.
We do. Yeah, a lot of changes. We lost our dog, Sir Russell, and that's been a week now, I think.
Yeah.
Week and a half. Yeah, so that's created, emptiness and quietness in the house that we're working through. And then, some business changes and moving as well. And with all that change comes opportunity, and you just got to look at it that way. So.
Yeah, I actually read recently that I believe it's in Chinese that a certain word, I think it's we'll have to double check this, but it's something along the lines of the word like obstacle.
Yeah.
It literally means like opportunity and challenge or something like that, which I thought was really cool.
I believe it. It's funny you say that because literally one of my intentions I write out every morning is that I look for joy and happiness in the people I meet and the obstacles I encounter in my day. Just being like, okay, like I want an obstacle because, I agree. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to try something new. It's going to create, even us like moving apart.
Yeah.
Potentially obstacles for podcasting.
Right.
But we both say it's like, this is a great opportunity. It's going to freshen up our camera, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do this. And I think that's a good mindset to have.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
Right? Like, how boring would your life be if there were no obstacles? Like, if you literally woke up in the morning and your day went exactly as you dreamt it would go.
Super boring, dude. It's like once you beat a video game, you
yeah,
have
exactly.
all the money,
cheat codes,
all the power, all the everything. You're like, all right, this is boring. You don't even play it anymore. And then you start over, because you're so bored.
Yeah. So, I don't know, man. It's good. I'm excited for everything's going. I'm excited for our community. Thank you so much for joining us, and especially those that are helping support us on Patreon and help make all this happen. We appreciate you more than you know, and we're excited to continue to develop this and create more purposeful community around the world.
Amen. Well, let's jump into this, Jerrod. Episode 105, Real Men Do Cry. My first question for you, Jerrod, is why are men so reluctant to show emotion, and where does that come from?
That's funny, man. Well, like let's talk about what we talked about off the air. You recently had a death. A close friend of you guys has passed away, and law enforcement was involved. And one of the things you guys talked about was like, wow, they people felt like they could be more empathetic and they could be more emotional. That's part of it. Like, part of why I didn't cry for many, many years was my job. Like, nobody calls the cops to have me come to your house and cry with you. Sometimes people feel like you should, but imagine if I took on that emotional burden all day, every day as part of my job. What would I have left for my family? What would you have left for yourself? So I think sometimes we're reluctant to show emotion and not cry because it's part of our profession. It's part of what we do. It's part of our expectation. But I think even more, a lot of times we're raised that boys don't cry. And I'm not saying raise sissy boys and kids that can't face adversity or they can't control their emotions in adversity, but I do think there are times that we should encourage our young people to cry more.
Definitely.
What do you think?
I think you're right on the money. That's a unique perspective that I didn't really think about until we were having this conversation off air about the profession, because I was sharing just a little bit of that frustration and I would say some microaggression towards the detectives who broke the news to us just 3 days ago. That a very close friend of ours, my girlfriend's old roommate, had passed, and they had found her at the bottom of this cliff, and just asking, like, what, are you sure? And we got to reflect on it a little later, and it did make me realize that, if your job is to deliver tragic, devastating news on a daily basis, then in that case, it will probably hinder your job if you really move into that heart realm and like feel every time and you can't, you're crying and you can't stay strong. So I think that's interesting, and I want to dive into that a little bit more, but I think you're right on the money, and I agree with how we're raised in this culture of the masculine kind of macho archetype. Be a big boy, you don't cry, and I think it starts at a young age just to be a little bit more efficient with school. If you have a kid feeling into anytime he gets his feelings hurt and is crying, it's going to be disruptive in the classroom. Yeah. You can't be getting stuff done, and I think that's good in the beginning, right? Of sometimes you got to be strong, but it can be tough. Can make things really tough if you're suppressing those real emotions.
And I think that's the issue, right? We don't have good boundaries on when we should cry and when we shouldn't cry, right? So, like, for example, wrestling. Most little kids, when they start wrestling, almost every match they lose, they cry. And then eventually you get them to understand, like, you just lost the sport, dude. Like, unless you're hurt, you don't really need to cry here. So you progress out of it. But what do we talk about? When are appropriate times to cry? You're feeling sad. Why are you feeling sad? Right? You're feeling like, what's going on? Like, a sport is an activity. Like, we could see, okay, you're crying because you lost or maybe you got hurt a little bit. But what about those days when the kid's just not engaged? When we see people pull, not just children, but anybody pulling out, withdrawing from society, right? Depression, right? Not having positive thoughts. That could be a good time to cry. If people prompt us and check on us and go back to you good, like really get past it, I'm fine. Well, I know you're not fine. I think sometimes we suppress it and like, okay, I can't cry, so now I'm never going to cry. Well, that's not what we were after. That's not the well-rounded, emotional human we want. Mm-hmm. And we're both reading the same book, and that's part of the archetypes of a masculine male, right, is well-rounded emotion the whole way.
Yeah.
And part of that is crying. But here, let me ask you this. Do you think that women cause men not to cry?
Indirectly.
Indirectly, yeah. Or very directly?
I think indirectly.
Okay, tell me more.
And here's why. I think that indirectly, depending on what you believe, for how, like, let's say you're a single man trying to attract a woman and partner into your life. Yes. You want to showcase that you are a strong male, that you can be emotionally strong. And therefore, you might not want to cry in front of a woman that you're interested in or a woman that you love. I think that, at least for me, I have a lot of these still to this day, even with all the internal work that I do on a daily basis. I have very macho, masculine beliefs deeply rooted within me because of how I was raised. to where even when my grandmother had passed, I had a really hard time, even though I kind of felt it, speaking with Courtney, my partner, crying in front of her. You know, I didn't really cry until I got in the shower. So I think indirectly, it's this, depending on what your beliefs are. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, what about a young boy that gets hurt and cries in front of his sisters and their friends, and they run around call him crybaby?
Mm-hmm.
What does that teach him? Right? Don't cry in front of girls.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, you get to the point where you're interested in dating people, or you're looking for a potential life mate. Because if we go back to our animalistic side, that's what we're doing, right? We're looking for that mate.
Right.
You're going to want to show toughness. You're going to want to show, in the face of adversity, you can count on me. I'll protect you. You know, and I think so indirectly at times, because men don't feel, what does crying show? Vulnerability. And because vulnerability could be perceived as weakness by certain people, men are less likely to do it in the hopes of impressing females. Right? So, like, think about relationships. If you can't cry in front of them, or you're afraid they're going to make... Do you see what I'm saying with that? Like, I think we inadvertently shut down that emotional spectrum for a lot of men through unhealthy relationships or one-sided relationships. Meaning, like, I need you to be strong and protect me all the time, which most men will gladly step up and do. But at the same point, if we can never feel pain and admit pain and hurt, well, that's not healthy.
Yeah. And I think, too, like, as much as, especially in this episode, we are advocating for you to feel your emotions, right? But we're still advocating for you to fulfill that full king masculine archetype, right? And if you do need to sob and cry, these things primarily are better felt and done in private, you know?
For sure.
But again, if you're feeling so emotional and it's the closest people to your girlfriend, your wife, I do hope that you can have that type of bond and strength to where if it comes up, you can let go in front of them. But no matter how close I am with my partner, I always feel that that's what I need to do, right? That's why I feel more comfortable. For example, like I'll use a perfect example. I don't think I have sobbed and cried, like a real deep cry in about 14 years since my grandfather had passed. Mm-hmm. Because anytime that I have emotional, I'm like, you know, like I always try to fight it, you know, to fight. Maybe I've shed a couple tears, but I didn't know what was happening with all of my emotions the morning I found out my grandmother died about 10 days ago. And that morning I found out, I got the news. I cried a little bit in my office. It was first thing in the morning. Talked to some family members, you know, a few tears, and I had all this craziness going on with my business. So I was like, I have to compartmentalize this for now.
Yep.
I'll come back to it and have to work. So I worked all day, got home. You know, Courtney asked me how was my day, how are things? You know, it was tough, And I get in the shower and had no idea, like it wasn't a conscious thought of like, oh, I need a place to go cry. I need to cry or do this. I knew I was feeling sad, right. But it just it took me over, and then I'm hunched, hands on the tile wall, and just like just crying, sobbing. And I think that we have an episode specifically around the suppressing of emotions, but I think this is what happens when you're just overwhelmed with emotion, that it has to come out in some way. And crying, I felt so much better. I was like, man, I literally thought like, why don't I cry more often? Like this felt like it was such a good and healing release for me, to where after that I really could reflect on all the positive, beautiful memories I had with my grandmother in a very productive and constructive way.
Yep.
So I think that...
No one thinks any less of you.
Right, exactly.
Right? Because you're in a healthy relationship with Courtney. She doesn't shame you for crying or being weak or get over it already, right? Because that's time. You know, and it's funny you say that because... man, I don't even know what day. Whenever the full moon was, this past full moon, I had to clean out Russell's stuff. And I didn't want Andrea to do it because I knew, like, it's going to be hard, like, getting rid of his dog bowl and all his food and stuff. And I found the same thing. Like, I was in the garage, like, or the next thing I know, I'm bent over just crying. I literally was like, man, when is the last time I cried, like, this hard for this long? I can't even, honestly, even remember.
Yeah.
And to the point, like, I walked out to put the stuff in the trash bin, and, like, Andrea's like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, don't talk to me. I was like, just leave me some space here.
Yeah.
But, like, afterwards, it was healing. It was therapeutic to, like, get all of it out. And, and even I thought, like, gosh, I wonder what else. Like, if I'd have got it all out initially, I could have healed quicker from. And I think I've shared with you guys on probably one of the earlier episodes, one of the very first calls I remember in law enforcement that really hurt me was that little girl dying in our arms. You know, and she was, gosh, now my memory's not as good, but, you know, it was like, she was like 3. Same age as Drianna, my oldest daughter. And, you know, it was a birthday party and a gate fell on her and crushed her. And we got there and the family was in chaos. Maybe I didn't tell this story, but anyhow, yeah, she
didn't tell that part.
Yeah, jeez. Gate fell on her, so we got the gate off her and we were giving mouth to mouth and trying to resuscitate her, and she didn't make it. And you know, you go back to law enforcement, like, I literally went from her dying in our arms and having body fluids and stuff all over my uniform to going home, showering, putting on a different uniform, and going right back out to take calls for the next 6 hours.
Jeez.
And I don't even know if I told Andrea what happened on that night because I didn't want her looking at Drianna with fearful parenting, like, oh my gosh, she could die today. Because it's right, because it's easy to transfer, like, oh, if this happened to them, it can happen to us. And we live in a world like, hey, endless possibilities.
Yeah.
And for years, I bet probably 12 years of my career, I never talked about that call. But literally every time I got sent to medical calls or I'd hear the medical tones on my radio, like, I would have a stress reaction because it would just flash me back to that day.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, if I'd have cried and, like, talked about it, what different things would have taken place in life.
Yeah.
And so why didn't we cry? Well, because it wasn't you don't cry. You're a policeman, you don't cry. And I'm not going to tell my wife because I don't want to burden her with this.
So what are the dangers in that, Jerrod? What are the dangers in suppressing that and not crying?
Well, I think one of the big ones that we see right now is suicide. Right? Like, think about, like, people feel overwhelmed. They feel there's no hope. They feel like that's the best option. And why do we get there? For a lot of people that I've seen and that I've gotten the opportunity to interact with throughout my life is they're suppressing the pain. They're suppressing the hurt. Mm-hmm. And it magnifies itself and it pulls you down instead of getting it out and accepting it and moving forward.
And it's mostly men. The overwhelming majority of suicides is men. I think it's close to 80%.
Yeah. And then let's talk about violence. Majority of violent crime in our country is committed by men. And a lot of them are very emotionally on the masculine side of things. No emotion, no pain. And what happens for some people, they will act out their pain aggressively towards others and cause others pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a consequence when you're suppressing these emotions, especially something as strong as crying, whether that's from grief or depression or whatever it is. When you're suppressing that, it's inevitable that it must come out in some other way, whether that's, like you said, lashing out towards others, compulsive action. It can even be something unhealthy as like way too compulsively working out physically, not eating.
Destructive behaviors. Yeah. And what does, like, think about, like, if we saw people that never smiled. If I was around you, I never saw you smile, never laughed. I'd probably want to inquire, like, dude, are you all right, man? Like, you just don't seem happy. You don't seem like you're seeing all the abundance in our world. But what if we applied that same thing to people we're around all the time? They're like, dude, I've never seen you sad. Like, I've never actually seen you cry or like not feel good. Are you okay? Because what's the first thing a lot of people say when they find out somebody committed suicide is, he was the happiest person I ever saw. Always telling jokes, smiling. I never saw this coming.
Mm.
Right? Because we're not looking for well-rounded emotions a lot of times. We see facades. And then that's one thing, like my son, we had a family friend through wrestling that committed suicide on this very day.
Oh, wow.
Gosh, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. And everybody was like, he was so happy. He was always the life of the party, always joking. I remembered in practice that was true, always. And then I remember, like, I never saw, like, what if this is masking, right? Because, even, like, especially wrestling, like, for us, we spent so much time around it. You could see kids in pain, whether physical pain from losing a match or just heartache from losing a match. But when I look back on this young man, I'm like, I never really saw him get upset when he lost. I never really saw him cry. Like I've seen Trey cry a ton after matches. And I was like, but he was always happy, always laughing. Should I have asked more? Like, dude, are you okay? Like, get past it. And I think that's something we should be looking for in our society, is because we're very well adept at looking for people that are unhappy.
Right.
But what about the verse, the person that's always happy? Are we taking time to make sure that we're getting to see them past the happiness?
That's an interesting point, because I definitely, you don't ever really wonder about those people or question those people. Someone that seems to have it all together and is always happy and doing fun things. I think as a society, sometimes we even become like jealous or envious of these people, when that might be a useful practice to kind of evaluate your circle and go ahead and check in on some of those that you think are the best off.
Well,
mentally.
Robin Williams, he comes to mind.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he was this great comedian, actor, but secretly he battled depression privately. And I guess that's why I want a lot of this episode to go as far as Real Men Cry, is you don't have to fight this stuff alone. Like, we all have it. That's my point.
Yeah.
Even the toughest of men have days they want to cry.
Right.
Even the bravest of warriors have doubts.
Yeah.
And what our journey together is really exploring, like, it's okay to be all of me around Ali. And as a business partner, you're not going to see me as weak if I have a day where I cry because I lost my dog. And as a good friend and MMA fighter, I'm not going to say, well, Ali can't fight anymore because he was sad that his grandma died. No, matter of fact, I'm going to be like, I love you more, bro, because I actually get to know all of you. And that is the damage that happens in our society when we feel like we can only show one side of our personalities.
Yeah.
And that is part of that whole theory on the archetypes of the masculine male, is we're suppressed.
Yep.
To where we only show this little bit of our life.
So let's get into that, Jerrod. How can we balance the masculine warrior, king, protector side with the lover, emotional, masculine side as well?
First off, I think you got to want to. Right? You got to get comfortable in who you are, that you're okay being all of these things. Nobody else can do that for you. Right? Like, I can give you the platform to say, hey, Ali, come to me, I'm here for you. But if you still put up the fence and the gates and say, no, I'm only going to show you this much of me, well, I can't do the rest for you. So I think a lot of it starts with having relationships with people that love us for all of us and that we trust, right? Vulnerability is a big buzzword. Brene Brown and all that stuff's been going around for a while, but vulnerability without trust is recklessness. So what do I mean by that? If I just cry in front of everybody and just tell everybody, oh, I had the worst day, I'm so sad. Well, not everybody in that audience has earned the trust to be in my vulnerable circle, right? So like, take an example for the gym. If we're at the gym and I'm having a terrible, like my dog died, and I come to kickboxing class, tech class, and I'm like, okay, get your gear on, come on out, and I start breaking down in front of everybody. Well, that wouldn't be appropriate, right? Not everybody has that same relationship with me. So at that point, even though I'm sad, I'm still going to be the coach for them because they're there. They need that. Mm-hmm. But now privately, once that class ends, you and a couple other people, maybe I do start telling you about Russell and his last dance. And I get sad. And I cry a little bit. Well, you're in the trust circle of vulnerability, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that's okay. Right? So I think we need to examine our relationships to make sure those people that are in that nearest circle, one, deserve to be there and that we can trust them with the vulnerable side of us.
Agreed.
Because not everybody gets to see that side of you.
Yeah.
You have to earn that. And I think when we look at it that way, like, that even puts your relationships on a deeper level. Like, if you show up and we've had emotional talks together. And when I see you emotional like that, I'm like, okay, while it doesn't feel good to me to see you emotional, it feels good to me to know that our relationship is strong enough that you feel comfortable being all of you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that vulnerability is powerful. When used in the right context, like you said, I love that you mentioned on trust. I want to hit on something from the book that it's fun that we are reading the same book. I just finished it, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Yep. And one thing they talk about is the lack of rituals now in today's society that really transition boy to man.
Yep.
Right? In all ancient tribes, ancient civilizations, there was always a ritual to where, like, now you're becoming a man. And now we've watered down these rituals to these kind of pseudo rituals, right? Of like, maybe you're in a fraternity and you get initiated. Maybe you're in a gang and you have this certain initiation, right? Maybe in certain religions and cultures, you have your bar mitzvah and you have like your specific birthday. Or in American culture, it's kind of now like, okay, you're 18 and now you're a man. There's no really rituals that do that. And I think for a lot of men, there's a reason why the king, warrior, magician, lover archetypes are laid out like that, because in a lot of aspects of being a man, you have to truly feel that you are the king and you are the warrior in your life before you can really access the full capacity of being the lover. So for example, in my life, I feel that I have just recently, in recent years, I'm a 29-year-old man now, even after college, during college, after college, kind of felt like, oh man, I can't cry in front of everyone. I wasn't secure in myself enough to believe that I was the true king and warrior in my life. A lot of the things that I've done is because I've needed that security. Okay, well, now I own my own business. Okay, now I'm an MMA fighter. Now, like, all of these things in my life have just recently gotten me to this place to where I feel confident in accessing the full aspects of the lover. When my grandmother died, I was like, whoa, like I'm crying, like I have this emotion, right? And I purposely shared a photo of myself crying because I want other men to realize that real men do cry. I wanted to show that me, Ali Abuslam, the business owner, the MMA fighter, the podcaster, like, I'm going to cry too. And things hurt me too. I'm emotional too. And I think that when we can do that, that's when we're really accessing the full stuff of the masculine. But like, you look at my life, I didn't really feel comfortable sharing that until I had achievements for me, right? For me, that made me feel like I feel secure and comfortable in these realms. So my advice to some of our men is like, what is it that's truly going to make you feel like the king of your life? Is it starting your own business? Is it starting your own podcast? What is it for the warrior for you? What's that challenge? What's that thing that you need to do? You know, for me, it was through martial arts, right? Wrestling through high school and college, jiu-jitsu, and now MMA, to really feeling that, to where a lot of us lack that, I think, too, because of society. We tear down a lot of these beautiful aspects of men, the warrior, you know, with the feminism movements of toxic masculinity and men shouldn't be strong and macho. No, all that stuff is good. But what we're trying to say is, how can you effectively balance that to be a fully embodied divine masculine male?
Yeah, that's well said. I agree. And so that's the challenge. How do you balance all of that?
So another example real quick is like, we don't have these lack of rituals, right? To where, let's say 1,000 years ago or whatever, there's a tribe, and that boy, once he becomes a man and he goes through whatever rituals, like there's crazy rituals out there, man, like where you have to like, there's this one that comes to mind of where they cut the skin to make the skin of your entire back like a gator, like an alligator, like all scaly. They just like slice up your back. Takes several months to completely heal after that, but for months, like, you have this like shelled up back with all these scabs. But anyways, crazy stuff like that, to where we don't have any rituals. So if you don't feel fully embodied as a man in certain aspects, like what's going to be your ritual, right? What's going to be, David Goggins said, what are the cookies in your cookie jar that you can go and pull out? Like, it might be for you, it might be a physical thing, right? Of like, I need to go run a marathon, or I need to do this 75 hard program, or I'm going to do a jiu-jitsu tournament, or I'm going to do an MMA fight, whatever it is, to have these rituals that bring you back to the fullest embodiment of who you're trying to be. And I think when you're constantly pushing yourselves in those realms, that you feel more inclined and comfortable with accessing the lover. That's why it's the last part of the book. Because as wonderful and amazing and arguably the best thing in the world that love and loving is, we have such a hard time showing that and expressing that, especially as men. Like right now, I just thought of how you're like, I love you more, bro. And first thing that came to mind is like, you don't hear that in the same sentence very often. Love and bro.
Yeah.
Right? Like love is almost independent of, in our culture, the masculine
Absolutely.
Image. So I think it's very important for you to feel embodied and fulfilled in the king archetype, in the warrior archetype, and even in the magician, before you can really access that lover. So make sure that you're not watering down those things. You're not succumbing to maybe feminist movement of like, and believing like, I can't be a man, I can't be masculine because that's toxic. No, like, healthy masculinity is very needed in this world, but you can't overdo it. We have to have that balance.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned rituals and stuff, and that's one thing that comes to mind for me is, where are positive places that we have rituals that allow you to become more manly in the warrior spectrum? The military, right? The military is a huge one. Mm-hmm. Sports, athletics, teams, big one. But what's the commonality? Community, right? And so I encourage people to always check, am I doing things as part of a group? Do I belong to anywhere where I go that people are invested in helping make me better, and I get to return that and help make them better? Or am I kind of lone wolfing life? Am I kind of just on the outskirts? Because, like, most of our gym is made up of people that come in and are like, I had played sports at school and I was just missing being around a team, or I had just gotten out of military and I missed just feeling like part of something bigger than me. And I think that is, when you go back to the king archetype, one of the big principles there is they're doing something for the greater good.
Yeah, for the kingdom.
Not for themselves, right? So crying, being emotionally stable, and meaning all your emotions, being vulnerable to people that have earned your trust, that is for the greater good, right? And so if you look at this, I would argue that not crying, not being your true self is selfish, because the world doesn't benefit from you not living your greater life, your purposeful life. And part of my purpose, think about this, guy, like, not to brag or to sound like a fucking arrogant prick, but I was a college athlete. I'm a military veteran. I was a police officer. I've done SWAT and all the stuff that tough guys do. I fought in the cage. But yet I feel like my greatest gift to the world is none of those things. It's the fact that, like, even though I've done those, I'm still okay saying, Ollie, I love you. Mm-hmm. I'm getting better at crying if I need to. So the things that, if you look, the things that the world's going to remember me for when I die is none of the tough stuff, right? Nobody remembers my MMA fights unless you know me. Like, they're not that significant. But my book can live for a long time. This podcast can live for a long time. All the people that come to us that are part of this community that continue to talk about us, to share our purposeful messages, can live for a long time, which would all be softer stuff in life. But just like you said, I'm able to do this now because I went through and I developed myself.
Yeah.
I didn't just stay in one stage. Right, and sometimes I think for men, because we have success in a certain stage, like I could have stayed in the police role forever because I was having success. But what cost would that have been? Well, I wouldn't have developed this side of things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had the podcast. I wouldn't have had, right? So part of what we've got to do as men is allow ourselves to have all the things, all the emotions, all the range. You can be tough. You can also be gentle.
And you want to talk about being tough, that's what the real fucking tough shit is, the emotional realm. Yeah. It's easy to go out and run. It's easy to lift weights. It's easy to fight even.
It's easy to be negative and mean to others.
It's easy to do all that. You want to be tough, start unlocking the emotional realm. Like body is first, right? Mind is kind of next, but then like the emotional realm to really navigate
right there.
Spirit, to really have control over your emotions, that's tough. That should be that next level that all men, all people should seek to get to. So as we wrap up, Jerrod, you mentioned how better off communities are with men being more emotionally well-rounded. How do you think our society would benefit from having more well-rounded emotionally men? Emotionally well.
Well, I think first off, individually, you have more meaningful and better relationships, right? Like the people that are in your circle are going to benefit from knowing all of you. The world's going to benefit from seeing all of you. So I think that's the first thing, is literally what hidden talents are suppressed right now by the very people that are around us simply because they don't feel like they can truly be themselves. Like, think about, like, what hidden gems do we not know because I don't build trust with you enough so you feel like you can be all of you?
Tons.
Maybe. I hope not, right? Like, I hope not for us, because, like, I hope we have that place where you're like, dude, I have this crazy idea and let's try this, because we've built that trust.
Yeah.
But how many people we encounter every day that have the hidden gem to answer one of life's mysteries, but because they feel they have to act a certain way, they'll never unveil it.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, to me, that's where society would benefit. We would learn more. We would engage more. The world, let's be honest, we'd probably have a lot more peace.
100%.
If we weren't all posturing for what's in it for us, and we were like, what can I bring? And that is, like, think about, like, gratitude. Why does gratitude work? Because it emotionally makes you think of what you already have, not what you want.
Yeah.
What does crying do? Crying is, to me, it's like, I cry because I mourn the loss of what I had, which makes me appreciate that I had it. Like, I don't cry because I want more. Like, I'm not going to cry and go get me another dog. No, I'm going to cry because Russell's time in my life was special, which makes me then appreciate this time of my life because, man, you know what? I could lose Ali next week. Maybe I should love him more today.
Yeah. And you could cry from the overwhelming joy, right? Crying comes with just overwhelming emotion, whether it be sadness or joy.
But it's usually suppressed when we deem it on a negative side.
Yeah.
So, I challenge you guys, if you're out there listening to us and you cried the last time your team won the Super Bowl or the World Series, but you haven't cried about a loss or you haven't processed that, then I would tell you, like, that's who we're talking to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're exactly who we're talking to this week. And
yeah.
And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you join us on Patreon and help us, like we said, continue to push this purposeful community worldwide. We are blessed to be able to do this. And quite honestly, man, I feel blessed that I'm able to be all of me. You know, because for many years, you wouldn't have seen stuff like this from me.
Yeah. Amen. I hope our community members can be leaders in their communities and spread this message. I think it's a very important one at this time. How would society benefit from men being more emotionally well-rounded? I think especially in the United States, we can see that we haven't had emotionally well-rounded leaders. We've had the shadow archetypes emerge. One of the shadow archetypes of the king archetype is the high chair tyrant, which scarily enough reminds me exactly from Donald Trump. And I'll say, you know, I have a lot of respect for a lot of things Donald Trump has done, but I would not say that he's an emotionally well-rounded individual. No, I would say the same thing for Joe Biden. Yeah. I think most of our leaders, male leaders, we see just a lack of emotional intelligence.
Yep.
And we're tricked to believe that it's so undervalued. I think it's one of the most undervalued things in the United States today is emotional intelligence. So,
and you can't be emotionally intelligent with others unless you are with yourself.
Exactly.
Right? Like all leadership starts with us. So
start crying.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.